Today I want to talk about false intimacy. What does that mean? I'm looking at it specifically from the angle of online dating, and I've decided to do an episode on this because I've just had many friends and many clients that have gotten into this trap of false intimacy when they're meeting someone online. So I want to go into what is that? What does that mean? What causes it? And for those of you that aren't doing online dating, I mean, this just might not be your episode, but even if you're not doing online dating, looking at what actually is intimacy. So I'm going to try and weave that in as well. But I really specifically want to speak to the people out there that are using online dating and are getting hurt essentially because of the illusion of false intimacy, the illusion of intimacy, but I'm going to call it false intimacy. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So let's begin with just talking about this kind of phenomenon of online dating. If you're in your 40s and 50s, this is going to be kind of a weird new thing, right? I mean, I know it's been around for a while, but there was the remembrance of what things were like before, right? Like people actually met people in real life. The thing that I find really heartbreaking is people in their 20s and sometimes even in their 30s, they literally don't know how. They think it's not possible. It's just not possible. Like you can only meet someone on an app. And, it makes me sad for the world really, because it's like, wow, we've been so removed and been pulled into this world of our phones and, everything that causes, right? Maybe some of the reason why it's hard to meet people in real life is because nobody looks up anymore. Everyone is on their phone. I'm always so kind of, I shocked is the best word that I can use when I go, like when I go to the sea or when I go, just anywhere, when I go out, you see everyone on their phone of all ages now, And it's just, it just makes me sad. But here we are. So putting my feelings aside, let's dive right into the false intimacy. So I've had several clients and I've also had several friends that have gotten emotionally involved with someone that they have not yet met. So I know I would recommend this myself. I know a lot of other dating relationship coaches, therapists would say the same thing. Get off text as fast as you can and meet them in person. And I even like if people are going to use dating apps, and I'm not here to say if they're right or wrong. I think it really depends on how one uses them. Like really, that is the most important part, because otherwise it can really be a trap. It can be a complete illusion. Maybe I'll get to that in a moment, but I want to dive more into this topic first. But it's really how you use it. So most would recommend get off of text as fast as you can. So the steps that I would personally recommend would be, okay, text, have some, really ask important questions. And I tend to think, well, what are some of the most important things in relationship? One of them is shared values. So you might see it on their profile, and that's what made you swipe right to begin with. But I would recommend asking a question that really has to do with their values to see if they will show up again, not just as a nice, pretty bio, but if they'll show up again, in that kind of truth, right? Then I recommend go to voice as fast as you can. Some people that makes them very uncomfortable, but there is so much to be picked up by voice. There is so much in the energy of voice, and also voice is a part of attraction. We have to understand that part of the problem with apps is that we're basing everything on a photo that might not even be recent, but it's a snapshot. And in a photo, sometimes you can pick up a little bit of like, Sometimes it's obvious. Oh, he looks like a bad boy. She looks like a gold digger, whatever the stereotype is, right? But there's a subtlety, right? And there's a subtlety that sometimes gets missed. So attraction is so much more, as we know, than just a photo, because also a photo is still, it's stagnant, right? So people look very different in movement. And of course, they look very different in life, even to a video. But voice is really important. That is part of attraction. And, some people, they go, okay, let's have a video chat before we even meet in person to see if that even feels right. And then, of course, meeting in person would be the next step. But the reason why I say move to it as quickly as you can is because what I have witnessed is that people, the false intimacy that I'm talking about, is they feel very close and very connected because they're sending texts. A lot of the time it's literally just text. It's not even voice. It's not even video. It's not even a phone call. They're sending texts back and forth and they're getting very emotionally involved. They might feel like, oh, we're being very transparent with each other. We're being vulnerable with each other. The trap that I have seen time and time again is that it's an illusion of intimacy. I don't want to discredit that someone might feel like, oh, this is a lovely conversation. I'm really appreciating the quote unquote intimacy of it, of what we can talk about. But as far as does that translate to even compatibility and connection and physical intimacy, not just psychological intimacy, or emotional intimacy. What I recognize about one of the faults or the traps of dating apps is that through this kind of false emotional intimacy comes a lot of projection. Ooh, they're this kind of person. Wow, because in their photo they look like this, and then they're writing this. You can have amazing chemistry via email. And then what happens, I would say, from the pool of friends and clients that I've worked with, I kid you not, 100%, 100%, not even 99, 100%, they've met and been like, oh, no way. Some people I know were talking for like months. Some were just talking for a week. But no matter what it was, they built a whole story. There was projection, there was hope, there was, whatever it was all this stuff. The fantasy was growing and building. And then they met in person. And for whatever reason, it could be because what you don't get from a photo is you don't have pheromones. You don't have energy. You don't have body language. You don't have energy. I already said energy, but it's so important. You're not getting that whole person. And so you meet them in person and maybe they don't look anything like their pictures, right? Or maybe you hear their voice and you're like, ooh, nope, that just doesn't resonate. Or maybe you just don't like their smell, right? There's so many things. And sometimes people, maybe they think, oh, they're cute and I really like our conversation, but I'm just like, there's just nothing there. There's just no chemistry. And people can have chemistry through writing, but it doesn't mean that translates into chemistry energetically and physically, right? So this false intimacy is a sense of getting really close to someone. Oh, we really know each other. And here's the thing. Even when people meet, let's say the old-fashioned way, and it's kind of like love at first sight, which, there's true and false to that. Sometimes we can really have a knowing, but sometimes we can fall into lust or into adoration or, I think one of the biggest pitfalls that we fall into with relationship is we go too fast and we fall into projection and building of castles, right? We can have a very fantastical mind. And I think there's a big blind spot around projection. So as I was speaking about last week, just in general, the reason why we do belief work, as an example, is to get to a very clear lens, as clear a lens as possible, so that we see things for what they are rather than what we believe them to be, or in this case, what we'd like them to be. So a lot of people fall in love with potential, right? Ooh, I see the potential in them. Or a lot of people, they'll It's like the whole conversation on red flags, they'll kind of push them to the side because the projection is, oh, but I want this to work out. Or, there could be all sorts of things. There could be, toxic kind of relationships that, they're very alluring, but they're very bad for us. And they're reflecting our patterns and our beliefs about ourselves. And people that have been single for a long time, they want to just make it work, right? But so let me go back to what I was saying is, even if people have this kind of love at first sight, it still requires time to get to know someone. It's just like when you move to a new country or a new city, I would say it takes 6 to 12 months to really get to know a place. You have to get to know a place through all 4 seasons. And I can say that with a certain level of expertise, if you will, because I've lived in many different countries and different continents and different, places, different languages. And I recognize that, yeah, a year, all 4 seasons, then you get to know a place. And I think, people were no different. I think it takes time. It takes time, and actually it deserves time, because that's also part of the magic, is the getting to know, like, ooh, who are you? And I'm learning more about you, and there's a deepening. And it's like we want to build a prefab house really quickly, and we're forgetting the foundation. And the foundation is super, super important. If you don't have a solid foundation, you have a house that's going to have like cracks, and it's going to start to crumble pretty quick, right? Relationships are no different. So this false intimacy and this like, ooh, we're really connected, there's an illusion to it. And I would say even a little bit of a, I don't want to go into like fear mongering when I say danger, but there is a bit of a danger, just because what I see on the other side of this false intimacy is heartbreak. And even worse than that is a story then of, I'm rejected, I'm abandoned, I'm not lovable, people don't like me, I'm ugly, something must be wrong with me, when it's just like the whole thing is kind of done really backwards. Because back in the day, before online apps and all of these online dating and apps and whatnot, you would catch someone's eye. You'd notice them. You'd think, oh, they're cute. Then there would be literally an energy across the room. If there was attraction, there would be energy across the room, and you would be sussing them out in a way. You would be looking at their body language, their energy, their facial expressions, all of these things. Like, this is what we do as babies, right? So that's why communication and attraction are very nuanced. Then you eventually maybe come up to one another, and so you get their smell, whether you're conscious of it or not. There's pheromones. There's their scent. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Then you hear their voice. Is there a resonance in their sound? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Then you get to talking. Then you might have a little bit of flirtation, which is so important, right? And that includes everything. It includes body language. It includes language, and it includes energy. It includes facial expressions. It includes all of that, right? And you're building attraction. Now, that also can be a little bit of like, if we focus too much on the attraction and not on the content, let's say, if there's anything of substance, not just the attraction, but is there something of substance where you feel there's resonance, right? But we begin with that, and then, you exchange numbers, and eventually you meet up and you go on a date, and then you go on another date, or whatever. I don't always like using the terminology, but you continue to see each other. And at some point through that process, there is a getting to know, there's a building of trust. Now, here's a big thing, actually. I'm going to pause on that one. There's a building of trust. People will give away a lot of trust through texts without having even met that person yet. There's again, I'm going to use the word, even though it feels a little bit harsh, there's a danger to that. Because, again, something on paper can be very different than what it's like in person. And really, trust can only be cultivated and felt live. It has to be that way. It's not that you can't get a sense of all of these things online, but it cannot be dependent on that. And I'm not saying be really suspicious and guarded. No, we want to be authentic. We want to be relaxed. The most important thing, actually, of all of this is what do you need to do to take care of yourself so that you're either not behind shields and armors and daggers, but also not just a doormat, right? What are the things that you need to do personally for you? Because we're all different. Some people are more sensitive than others. Depends what your wounding is, depends what your fears are, depends on what your beliefs and insecurities are. That's why all of this work is so important, so that you know what that is within you and you heal and alchemize what is no longer serving you, that maybe keeps you in the perpetual state of wounding or fear, or just at the very least, like false beliefs about yourself, men, women, love, relationship, all of that stuff. So again, coming to the clear lens, but really knowing what do I personally need and what's important for me? What are my values? So sometimes it is about communication or accountability or consistency or authenticity or integrity or truth, humor, depth, whatever it is. We have to really understand this about ourselves first, and then know that what we value and what we want to get to know, with that person, that deserves time to unfold and to not project, but to really allow that person to show us who they are. Now, Maya Angelou, I think it was Maya Angelou that said, people will show you who they are right away. Believe them. So often, sometimes part of the false intimacy is that we like something. Maybe there's something where we get a little inkling of like, I didn't like that, or something kind of just felt off, but we brush it away. And again, it's like, and there is a point to like give a person a chance. But I'm talking about the things that are pretty strong, and part of this process is, and this is what I do when I work with individuals that are dating, that are single, is how to really cultivate and trust your intuition. Because that language is going to be so important. And also to understand what it is that you really want, not from a toxic connection, but really, 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 what is it that you want in relationship? Who do you have to be that person? And to know what that feels like in your body, so that that's the barometer for what you're, I'm not going to say looking for what you're bringing in, magnetizing, calling in, whatever you want to call it. We have to be very, very clear with that, because otherwise we're kind of going into, a massive warehouse, like supermarket, being like, I don't know what I want to eat, and then it's not even like, oh, I could eat this, I could eat that. It's like, no, what does my body want? What's actually healthy for me, right? So you narrow it down, that you really, really narrow it down so that you're very clear and you're very specific. So, with this false intimacy, we think that we know people before we actually know them, and doing it all without actually being in their physical presence. Maybe you make a really good friend. That's great. But I think most people are on dating apps because they want a partner, right? They want a relationship. And, I like I said, I know people personally that for months were just feeling like, wow, yes, this is the person, and they're amazing. And, the way that we talk together and all of this. And then they meet, and immediately it's like, oh no. It's just like not there. There's no spark whatsoever. And then sometimes like the painful part is one person feels it, the other person doesn't feel it. But it's just that, even let's say you do have a beautiful connection online, and let's say it really is genuine and authentic, you still don't know until you've seen that person. And what I see is people set themselves up for heartbreak because they've already, in a way, opened their heart or opened themselves up. They've created a story. They've created whatever it is, the image, the fantasy, even let's say it's based in like, oh, this is a beautiful connection. But they've invested, that's the word I'm looking for. They've already invested so much of themselves that then the disappointment is even greater because you're like, oh, but I felt this. And then what happens is like, God, well, now I really doubt myself. God, could my intuition be that wrong? It might not have been that, your intuition was wrong, because maybe you did have a very nice kind of whatever exchange. That's possible, but it doesn't mean that that translates into a romantic exchange. I remember having an experience when I was younger where somebody had emailed me. They'd found me online and they'd emailed me, and we were going back and forth in emails, and the emails were fantastic. I remember just like being like, wow, this person is very articulate and funny, and, a lot of things in common, and just like, long, very eloquent emails, and funny and fun. Didn't even know what this person looked like because it wasn't a dating app. So then we had a video chat, and I immediately was like, I'm just not attracted to him, but I thought, but the exchange was so nice. Like, okay, I'll meet him in person, because I was at the point of just like, be open. But I remember saying, like, I will meet you, but I'm very clear that I don't want us to have any expectations, because you just don't know until you meet in person. You don't know until you meet in person. So I would love for us to meet, but without any expectation. And I'm going to be really honest with you. Like, I will let you know right away, for me, if it's a yes or a no. So, had the date, and it was just very clear that it was a no for me. But had a nice conversation, had a good laugh. And then said goodbye. But I did immediately tell him, like, listen, I appreciate all of this, and just the courage even to, take the leap into contact. And because that's a big thing too, right? It takes a lot of courage. But immediately said, I really, whatever. I said it in a very kind way. But had I just stayed like with the email part of it, like for months and months and months, I could have built in my head that this person was just like the dream guy, right? It's an illusion. Well, it's not that it's entirely an illusion. It's an illusion because it's not the whole picture. So it's a limited view of the entire thing. And relationship is very complex. There's many layers to it, and there's many aspects that kind of need to fall into alignment and into harmony to make a relationship actually work, right? There's so many different facets of a relationship that need to be there. You can, see this like, wow, this person is just so lovely and such a kind-hearted person, and just intelligent, but you just don't have any attraction to them. For whatever reason, it's just the chemistry is not there. That's pretty hard to force. Like, if it's just not there, it's just not there. Sometimes I have heard on rare occasion that, sometimes people have been friends for a long time and never ever looked at each other in that way, like never romantic, like actually wouldn't even be remotely attracted, and then something changed and all of a sudden they ended up being in a relationship together. But I would say that's a rare case. But I'll never say never, just like you can't always say always. I mean, sometimes I use that word and after I'm like, why did I use that word, Corinne? Don't talk in absolutes, because anything is possible, right? But what I want to hone in on is just take care of yourself. Take care of yourself not to fall into that kind of pathway of just creating intimacy where there really isn't. Because true intimacy, let's talk now about what is intimacy. Intimacy, a lot of people have run off with the term intimacy because they use it in like tantric circles, right? And I'm not going to go too much into that because I see a lot of illusions in that as well. And I don't want to be judgmental about it, but just from what I see and what I know, people that have been on the inside of it, is that there's a lot of shadow trauma wounding that's being played out, and that's being masqueraded in some kind of like sexual liberation, right? There's a lot of unsafety that I see in that, and not all, right? I don't want to make a blanket statement, but I do see that, and I do see an illusion of intimacy in that as well, because a lot of people think that intimacy is just to do with the body and it has to do with sex. The way that I'm defining it, but this is just my view, don't have to, you can take it or leave it. Intimacy to me it requires two things. It requires heart, and it requires vulnerability. Actually, the third thing that I would say is it requires truth, right? I mean, it requires many things, but those to me are at the very, very core. I throw authenticity in there as well. But it's like it requires us to be in our heart. You can't be physically intimate without being emotionally intimate, right? Otherwise, it's just physicality, or it has a totally different definition, right? But true intimacy, the way that I am defining the word, is it's my heart is getting to know your heart. My heart trusts your heart. I am showing you who I am in my authenticity and in my truth, and I am seeing you in your authenticity and in your truth. And the connection that is created through that is in the vulnerability of I am allowing myself to be seen. I'm allowing myself to be felt, heard, understood as a human being, as a soul. But it's not a rational, logical thing, and it's not purely a physical thing, right? But if there's no heart, to me, there's no real intimacy, superficial intimacy, physical intimacy, but not true intimacy. And with that said, intimacy doesn't have to be about sex. Because I often, when I've worked with people around intimacy, and I will ask them, how intimate are you with yourself? And I'm not talking about playing with yourself. I'm talking about how honest and vulnerable and authentic and truthful are you with yourself? So this plays into self-acceptance, embracing all parts. Do you know your shadow? Are you willing to share your shadow with your partner? Are you willing to reveal that? Are you willing to sit in a space with each other where you can hold that without projecting like you need to fix things for me, without the codependency, without the, mommy and daddy issues, whatever, but whatever the wounding is, that it's like, okay, I can hold that and I can be here with you and we can support each other. It's the interdependent model versus the codependent model. An intimacy of that kind requires time. It requires that getting to know. So, going back to the term false intimacy, it can't be done in a week or in a month. It can't be done through text, where goodness knows how much we also misconstrue because there's no tone. That's another part, right? Tone of communication and attraction. And it's just words. And sometimes a lot of people are reading between the lines. And, a lot can get built through reading between the lines, whether it's an increasing fantasy or an increasing insecurity. So it's kind of like going into this with feet on the ground and being, not to take away the romance from it, but being really practical, like just being really sensible, really practical. If you feel drawn to someone, maybe you really like their photo, you really like their bio, you like the answer to the question that you ask, and this question has some kind of substance and depth to really get to know their values, then, if the communication is good and they seem respectful and there's consistency in the way they're showing up, then it's like, some people have the rule of thumb that they're not going to meet someone until they have a video chat with them so that they can actually kind of, even though it's not exactly the same as seeing them in person, but it's like the next level. But then quickly move to seeing them in person. And I think, I've heard this with quote unquote dating coaches, is just put on your filters, meaning like there's a lot of things that there's a lot of profiles that can be weeded out, right? And making sure not to fall for men or women that are not going to be good for you. And it's not about having a prejudgment, but you just know, you can tell, right? There's a lot of discipline that's required in this process, and there's a lot of self-care. Like a lot of self-care that's required, and boundaries. And when I say boundaries, I don't mean hard defenses. Boundaries for me, they're an act of self-care and self-love. It's that, I think what Buckminster Fuller said, that boundaries are a circle that you draw around yourself. It's a sacred circle, and everything that's inside is sacred. And so you get to choose what comes in and what comes out. Right? But the sacredness of it is, I love myself. I take care of myself. I don't have to be defensive. I don't need to put barbed wire up. That's not what boundary is. Boundary is, I know how to take care of myself. I know what I need. I know when to say no. I know when to say yes. I know when to go home. I know when to go out. I know what to eat. I know how to nourish and nurture myself. I know how to communicate. All of these things are an act of self-care, and self-care then defines healthy boundaries. So what do I want to conclude with? What is the invitation? Just to recognize the illusion. And I want to drop in that I don't want to take away the romance of meeting someone, because that's fun. It's exciting. And of course we have a little bit of projection, and I'm not trying to get like super sterile and black and white. Nothing is ever black and white. But what I want to encourage is keep your feet on the ground. Stay grounded. Don't put yourself in a position where you're potentially setting yourself up to be hurt and to have heartbreak. So check in with yourself. How does my body feel right now? How do I emotionally feel right now? What are my boundaries? What are my needs? What are my values? Am I embodying them? Am I being honest and truthful with myself? Now, one thing I'll throw in, because I know some people that have had long distance, but it tends to be that they've met each other in person first. And I would say that's different, because at least they've had the in-person. They've had all of those cues that they need to know, I like you, right? They've had the smell, the energy, the body language, the tone, the flirtation. They've had all of that. They might have even already had physical touch. They've had all that. And so that there's something that is based and rooted in reality. And then maybe for whatever reason, they live in different regions, and there's the getting to know. And then you have to figure out, I do know someone that's a famous person, and that's how she met her husband, but they met in person first. They met in person first. And that, I think, makes a really big difference. I think it's difficult if, let's say, you meet online and you don't live in the same place or country. But I guess I would still encourage, try to make it happen as fast as you can. Because time, we invest over time, right? And so the more that we invest, the more that we open our heart, the more that we create hopes and dreams and desires and fantasies and maybe projections, or the more that a story is written, and then all of a sudden you meet someone and you're like, oh, this isn't a book. We have to chuck it. You're like, my God, I've invested a lot of time writing those pages. And there's nothing to be lost from it, to be honest. I think that there's always something that we learn. But I wanted to put this episode out there because it's just happened enough over the years that I thought, okay, let's at least talk about it. And talk about the practical ways of just taking steps to just not fall into that trap. Still have fun with it, play around with it, but take care of yourself. So my invitation to you is just to be wise with it. And I think everything online has an element of illusion. Everything. And the reason for that is because you can't know that person, and you can't know what's going on behind that photo or that video, what happened right before, what happened right after. There's so many people that could be like, whatever, just had an argument with their spouse, and then they get onto social media and they're like, lights, camera, action, and they're happy and they're showing their life, and then they go back to tears after. It's all an illusion, and especially now with filters and AI and all of this stuff. So anything online has an element of illusion and projection and fantasy. And I think it has really affected our brain. I really believe that it's affected our brain and our way of being. And so then we're pulled into this fantasy world. That's basically what it is. Hopefully there's people online that are, as authentic and genuine and truthful and all of these things, but we still can't fully know them. And we still don't know their lives. I think there's a lot of people, even, for myself, putting myself out there and being a voice or whatever. Whenever you put yourself online, there is a vulnerability to that. And people think that they know you. And even though I am trying to show up as authentically and as genuinely, and I show my shadow and I show my joys, but they still don't know me. If they haven't met me personally, if they haven't talked to me personally, if they don't know what personally is going on in my life, they just don't know me. They might know a part of me, right? But that's just another example. It's no different than the dating aspect of it. But the problem with the dating aspect of it is because it includes and involves our heart and love, that's a tender part. And that part, of course, we have been I'm not going to say slightly, we've been heavily indoctrinated by Disney and by, romantic comedies. And I think so much I could just talk about the whole paradigm of relationship is changing. Maybe I have to save that for another episode. But, again, all of these things, this is why I mean, keep your feet on the ground, stay grounded, stay wise, trust yourself, listen to yourself, take care of yourself. And it doesn't mean that you can't create intimacy, but just don't create it too fast. Like that trust takes time. It takes time. And there are steps to it. There are things that need to come in place. Like, first we have to go, do I know this person? Do I actually know them? Then I have to see, okay, I know this person, but are they showing up consistently? Because when it's erratic, that doesn't make us feel very safe, right? Because it's unpredictable. So what I mean by consistency is it's not that there has to be this routine and rigidity, but it's like consistency of character, that their integrity, that they show up with their integrity every time, that there isn't like, well, in this moment you seem like a good person, in that moment you seem like a dick. You know what I mean? So do we know that person? Are they consistent? Are they reliable? Can I rely on this person? I know them. I see they're consistent. Can I rely on them? Can I give them my heart? And give them my heart? Can I open my heart to them? And again, when I say this, it's like words are so limiting sometimes and they can be so misconstrued. I don't mean like I'm taking my heart out of my chest and I'm giving it to you. And I'm not talking about the codependent form of that. But it's kind of who had said that... It's something along the lines of we can tell our story to anyone, but not everyone is deserving of hearing it. And deserving is a little bit of a charged word, but you know what I mean? It's like we get to choose. We get to discern. We get to discern who do we open our heart to, and does it feel right for us? Not from a place of defense, but from a place of self-care. So do I know them? Do they show up consistently? Can I rely on them? Then comes trust. Trust is the last thing to show up, right? And what's happening is the false intimacy is, I feel there's a connection. Connection is another thing that can be a little bit of an illusion, because you might feel a connection with someone doesn't actually mean that that's a healthy relationship for you. Doesn't actually mean that they're the right person for you. It's loads of people that have like amazing chemistry. But we have a connection, but it's a totally toxic relationship. So connection is only one aspect. It cannot be all of it, right? All of the other aspects are really important. We're looking at this from the lens of wholeness, right? So yeah, if there's this like, but we have this amazing connection and the way that we talk with each other, but if you haven't met and you haven't found all those things out of who that person is and are they consistent and are they reliable, you can't trust them just through you can't have that level of trust that we're not even conscious of knowing that we need. It's like the instinct. That instinct can only be, let's say, it feels fulfilled or relaxed when it's seen that person and when it's been with that person enough times to know it feels good and right and safe for me to be with you. right? Even when I say the word say, there's so many words. I'm like, oh man, they can really be misconstrued, but I don't want to walk on too many eggshells. I think if you know me well enough by now, you'll know a lot of the intention that I have behind these words. So it's never coming from a place of fear or defense. It will always come from a place of authenticity, integrity, self-care, self-love, self-worth, right? This is why those are fundamentals, so that we're not behaving in ways where we're either throwing ourselves into the lion's den or barring ourselves up behind castle walls with a moat with alligators in it, right? Neither extreme is healthy. Always the middle path, always balance, always equanimity. So yeah, I hope that I'm going to leave it at that. I hope that's been helpful as just something to think about, to contemplate, and to now have the awareness, because anytime that we discuss something or we think about something, then there's awareness. And then you can recognize, oh, what am I doing? Like now the observer can come in, the witness come in, not with judgment, but just like, how do I do this? How am I behaving? How am I feeling? And really witness yourself in that process and really learn to trust your body, your intuition, your feelings, your gut instinct, your heart, not just the mind, because the mind can go in all sorts of directions sometimes. And just take care. Just really, really take care. And don't be too quick to fall into intimacy and profound connection, because you know what? Part of the magic is building that slowly, slowly. Getting to know them slowly, slowly. And then you get excited for the things of the deepening of the relationship and the deepening of the connection and the deepening of the intimacy. And that cultivates trust, and that cultivates a bond, and that builds a foundation that is steady and sturdy and grounded and solid. And then you can build a beautiful house on top of that. So I'll leave it at that. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.